We're coming at you from a bunch of different states tonight. We're going to wait till our watch parties all get set up. You guys kind of know how we do this. I think they're being set up. I hope they're being set up by somebody. I'm not doing it right now.
Nah, bro.
Yeah, and for some reason we have subtitles on the screen tonight. We're going to roll with it, huh?
Hey, sweet.
I don't know if they work, but
all right.
Yeah, there's Idaho's live. We're going live. Missouri's live.
Did we talk to Greg about going live on this page tonight? For anybody who's wondering, if you're wondering where Greg Pruitt is, his wife is like 9 months and 3 days preggo, and I think they're at the hospital, or they're going there, or they're on their way there, or I'm not sure what. Be. So the way it sounds, we've lost Greg for the night, but very happy tonight, you guys. We have a special guest on our show. In addition to the Door Brothers and Patrick, we've got State Senator Eric Burlison. You can see him here tonight from Missouri. We're going to talk to Eric about what he thinks on this whole coronavirus situation as it pertains to your gun rights and what he's seen in Missouri. A lot of people in Missouri asking a lot of questions on the Missouri Firearms Coalition page about this whole thing. And we're going to discuss that with Eric here in a little bit. I'm sure we have updates on HR 5717 as well.
Correct.
And links on that. I think Ben's going to be discussing that here in a little bit. But yeah, get the watch parties going, guys. And I think ours are being set up now.
Yeah, we're over 1,000 people live right now, guys. Like and share with your friends. Wow. Pass it around. Let us know where you're watching from. I see Jeff from Burnsville. I'm not sure where that is or what state that's in.
Minnesota has to be.
In. Burnsville, okay. Oh, yeah.
So let us know where you're watching from, guys. We're getting these watch parties started.
Well, I'm going to talk for a minute while we're getting the watch parties set up. For those who don't know, Eric Burlison, the Missouri folks, I'm sure all will. But, you know, it's about, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, I met you, Eric, and I was newly the policy advisor for the Missouri Firearms Coalition, and we wanted to get constitutional carry passed in Missouri because my native state of Iowa was being held back by moderates on the right and Senate Democrats on the left who held the chamber in Iowa at that time, and got involved with the Missouri Firearms Coalition and met with Eric at a Irish pub, I think, in Springfield. I think it was an Irish pub. And
can't do that anymore.
What we wanted to do, yeah, it'd be closed now. It was essential to us at that time for our business meeting. But Eric was the bill sponsor for constitutional carry in Missouri in 2016. I remember I called Chris when I was leaving that meeting, Eric, and I was like, he's agreed to do it. He's going to file the bill. I was like, but you're not going to believe this. Chris is like, this guy, he's such a dreamer. He said, we're going to get it passed this year. We're going to pass it this year. I remember just like laughing the whole way home.
Oh, we did. We had a good chuckle about that. Like, oh boy,
he actually believes we're going to pass it this year. And for the Missourians, that Eric was right, and he had the last laugh, not myself.
He did.
And not only did we pass constitutional carry law, but towards the end of that fight, once all the rest of the groups who had been opposing the bill for the previous 3 months, once they all realized that Eric's bill was going to go all the freaking way, we added everything to that bill. So what was it, Eric? When it's all said and done, what all was on that bill?
So we had obviously constitutional carry. We had stand your ground, which was huge. That was that was a major victory.
Huge.
It was huge.
Yeah.
We also did for those people that wanted to get a lifetime concealed carry permit. We added a lifetime carry. I think we were the first state in the country to do that. I don't know if any other states have done it, but we have it.
It's great.
And
I did not realize a lifetime carry was a part of that.
Yeah, I remember that.
Fantastic.
And there was a really important cleanup to the state's castle doctrine law, because prior to the bill you passed, if I was at your house, for example, visiting you, and somebody broke into your home, I wasn't allowed to use a firearm, mine, yours, or anybody else's, to defend myself or you and your lovely family, because it wasn't my house. And that was one of the things you did in that bill as well. So castle doctrine cleanup, stand your ground law. I mean, it was the mothership of all state level gun bills. Huge victory for gun rights. And then of course your governor. You've had a lot of governors in the last couple of years. We won't get into all that, but it was a couple of governors ago vetoed that bill, and you led the override.
Oh, and that override was hard. It was actually harder than you would think, because it takes a super majority, it takes 2/3 majority, but we had a situation where, you have Republicans that suddenly start getting worried. Is this the right thing to do? The Sheriff's Association, even at that time, they were starting to put pressure on legislators to not override the governor. In fact, we had a few members that were expressing concern in caucus meetings and things like that.
Yeah, we did.
And so we had some, it's kind of like trying to keep all the frogs in the barrel. And I spent that whole summer just answering questions, calling people whenever I'd hear about somebody that had a concern. I'd have to do the research, call them and get it, put the fire out in everybody's district, and just try to keep everybody encouraged and console that they, to remind them, you voted that way, 4 months ago. It was the right vote. Just stick with us. And so thank God.
Eric's job was to do the encouraging, and then Chris and I, our job was to do more of the beating.
Well,
and,
ass beaters. Yeah, a little bit of that.
So we had some folks that needed to have a friendly encouragement from then Representative Burlison. Some folks needed to have more of a nudge, and we were happy to do our part in doing that. But it was a huge victory for gun rights. And Eric then went on to be promoted by the voters in Springfield. He's now State Senator Burlison, and is our lead sponsor on both SAPA legislation this year in Jeff City, as well as gun-free zone repeal. So a lot going on in the fight for gun rights. Well, there was, and now everything is kind of stalled out. We had committee hearings. You and I both testified, gosh, was that 2 months ago now, on both of those bills. They've been stalled out with this whole situation. But
is my old buddy Senator Kehoe, was it Kehoe? I think he and I had went around a couple times. Is he still
he's gone up and out.
Yeah, he's now the lieutenant governor.
He's gone up.
There you go.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I have a question, Senator Burlison. You talked about, and you don't have to name names, people who maybe were a little bit weak-kneed on this when it came to the veto override. What are some of the things that people say, or what did they say, if you can remember? I mean, if you can remember, if you can't, so be it. But what would they say? We can't do it, or just because I think the people out there, they don't get it, especially when a Republican, they campaign on the Second Amendment. Then they get in office, we deal with here in Georgia, and then they don't do anything when they get there. And so here you have an actual vote. What were some of the excuses that you heard, if you can remember?
Well, I mean, honestly, what it all boils down to, that you got to get down to the root of where it's coming from. And it's the loss of control, the loss of power from elected officials, from sheriffs or law enforcement. I mean, now I will say this. The vast majority of law enforcement in Missouri supports Second Amendment issues, but you've got, but it was that loss of control. And I think a lot of it was a fear of losing money.
Oh yeah.
Because in Missouri, those concealed carry permits had become a cash cow for our sheriff's offices, where, they hire one clerk who spends all day just ringing in people for $100 a pop. That becomes, it was basically a cash register.
Job program.
Huge. Well, I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of gun owners who carry with a permit in Missouri. There was that way. We know that for a fact because the Obama administration took all those records back in their time. So if you take a couple 100,000 gun owners divided by 5 for a 5-year permit back then times 100, I mean, the math is very easy to do, and it gets very big very quick.
We did our bill sponsor down here in Georgia. Representative Matt Gertler is running for Congress now, but a couple years ago he put in, I guess you had to request it through the chair of the committee in which your bill is in, the chairman, to put in a request on what do they call it, a fiscal note. Yep. So they took all the money, $14 million a year in the state of Georgia, dotted amongst the counties. But yeah, I mean, that's a job or two in these little counties. And, who wants to tell the local guy that they lost their job because they just passed constitutional carry, I mean, yeah. So we hear that too down here, which is
by the way, thanks a lot, Eric, because now in Ohio and Pennsylvania, on the pages that I'm watching right now, everybody is coming unglued about this idea of lifetime permits.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
CHLs. So like, hey Chris, add that to the list. Modify the constitutional carry bill. And so I've always warned these other 3 guys, we got to be careful about bringing politicians on here. By the way, you're the first politician.
You are the first
to come on here. So
yes.
I'm
getting questions on the Iowa gun owners page now about what Iowa lawmakers we're going to have on here. And I'm very happy to answer that question, because the answer to that question is a big fat 0, because exactly 0 state lawmakers right now in Iowa have done the work that that Eric Burlison has done, that Ron Hood has done in Ohio, that Gertler has done in Georgia, that Rick Bertrand did in Iowa in his day. So we're an exclusive group, and the Iowans have been betrayed time and time again by our Republican establishment people in the state. So I mean, don't hold your breath, Iowans. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. It's their fault, and that's just the way it is.
And I was just gonna say, like, you got all these Minnesotans watching today. They've never actually even seen somebody like Eric Burlison before in this state. Not ever. Not ever. I mean, I know there's gonna be all the Minnesota politicians are gonna watch this afterwards because they watch everything that we do to try to find a way to get out from underneath the fact that they don't ever do their jobs. But, if any of you are even like leaning towards having a spine, just watch closely here because you're about to actually see some representation for gun owners. It's something this state of Minnesota desperately needs because it's an absolute famine up here of anybody with some testicular fortitude. It's really bad.
Now, Ben, I do have to tell you, so I think I told you before, my in-laws live in Minnesota.
Right.
And so my niece and nephew live there. And I will tell you this, when they come to visit us in Missouri, I take my nephew out and take him out to the range and show him how to use a firearm.
Well, it's just
maybe there's at least one person in Minnesota that
does he want to run for office? That's the question.
We'll try to recruit him.
Yeah, I mean there's some great Minnesotans, but our legislature is just toxically far left. Even the Republicans are the most liberal, left-leaning Republicans probably anywhere in the country. They're absolutely abysmal when it comes to the Second Amendment. And our Republican Senate Majority Leader has been all over statewide media saying that they're never going to move any far-right bills like Stand Your Ground and constitutional carry. He said they're extreme, they're radical, they're all of these things. So all of those bills that, former Representative, now Senator Eric Burlison moved and fought for with the Missouri Firearms Coalition to get passed into law in Missouri. For all the Minnesotans watching, Minnesota Republicans are calling all of those laws that they enjoy in Missouri far left and extreme, and they say they're not going to touch them here in the state of Minnesota.
And meanwhile, because then Representative Eric Burlison decided he wanted to try, now today, was it 5.7 million people in Missouri? How many people in Missouri?
6.1.
Yeah, almost 6. Yeah,
oh.
6.
Yeah, 6.1 million people in Missouri enjoy these freedoms that you don't get to have in Minnesota, and you don't get to have in Pennsylvania and in Ohio. So
I remember calling you, Eric. You were gonna go ahead. I cut you off. Go ahead.
I was going to say we overrode the governor. So when we passed the bill, the first time when it passed was the last hour of the last session that I served as a representative.
Yeah.
And
it's right.
And it was like the epic, the end of an 8-year career. And and so then I drove home that night. Actually, I went home because I try to stay away from the Capitol building as much as possible. I went immediately after session, packed my apartment, threw everything in my truck, and drove home. And I was driving home at like 1 a.m. And it almost, the impact of that, how much I realized, I said, oh my goodness. I mean, I was able to be a part of something that gave that much freedom to that many people. It gave me chills. And honestly, I just almost came to tears because, you only live this life once.
Yes.
And honestly, I don't get elected because I want a title. I got elected because I want to do great things, do things that impact people. And honestly, I'm a believer. I'm a person of faith. I'm a person who believes Jesus sacrificed everything for my life.
Preach it.
Yeah, we all are. Everybody here.
Good Friday is tomorrow. The ultimate sacrifice was made. And that we have to remember that. But I keep that in mind. It's like, I'm not here to make the world happy. I'm here to make, ultimately, I've got a long life after this time on earth, and I want to look back and not regret anything that I did while I was here. And so that's how the viewpoint I have. And that moment driving home made me made me realize that it was all the pain, all the door knockings of campaigning, money raising, all of that stuff, all that grind. It was worth it right then at that moment.
Do you hear? Do you hear everything he just said?
The hair is standing up.
Yeah,
on my
the
arms
hair
right
is standing.
It's ridiculous.
Everything he just said there, Ohio and Pennsylvania. This is exactly what we are working for with these organizations that you see represented right here. We helped out in Missouri. We're trying to do it in all these other states. But what he just said there is so true. We only live once. That's why it's so easy for us not to strike the deals, not to stab our membership in the back, because these are real issues that get to benefit millions of people if we just put in the work, if we hold that line, if we viciously attack. So, I mean, I couldn't have said it any better.
Yeah, and that's why I've, for a long time up here, we've just screamed, demand better, demand better. I mean, so many people just get used to, it's like, well, as long as a Republican isn't like full blown introducing gun control, I guess they're okay. I mean, we're so used to putting up with, just no representation when it comes to Second Amendment issues. Nobody up here has that kind of fire in their belly. Nobody looks at that from that angle. They sit there and say, there's nothing I can do. I'm just a state rep. Leadership won't like me. And they make 10,000 excuses, and we just say demand better, because it's something that Minnesotans have never seen before. Oh, it's ridiculous.
I remember that night, and I actually, it's kind of weird because Chris was down there before I was, because I got stuck in a jury trial as the jury foreman in Iowa, and I was trying to dude, we got to wrap this case up, Your Honor, because I got to go. I remember getting down there, and I normally hate me a Speaker of the House, and I mean bad. It's just it's bred in me coming out of Iowa. But I remember watching Speaker Richardson that night as you were leading the override floor action, and there was all of these crazy, Bloomberg-funded radicals there. And he grabbed that gavel and he slammed that sucker down, and he points up and says, "You will be quiet or you will be removed."
I loved it.
Oh my gosh,
that was a good. He pointed that thing right up at him. I think he even grabbed the gavel, the thick part of it, and pointed it right up at him. I mean, it was crazy.
He was a great speaker. He was a great Speaker of the House.
Yeah, that was a good one. Well, we're getting a lot of questions on the Missouri Firearms Facebook page right now, talking about the coronavirus, talking about the possibility, people asking about what about martial law, asking about, businesses being shut down, asking about unemployment numbers being stratospheric. So I think we're going to kind of mention that. There's definitely a lot of, hold on, I'm reading one of the comments here. So there's some guy in Missouri. Well, we'll deal with him later, Madeline. Some guy in Missouri is mad because people can now bypass the NICS system when they buy a gun. I don't have your name, but it's commented 10 times in the last 2 minutes. So if you don't stop, first of all, we're going to axe you off the page. But secondly, dude, that's the whole point. We don't want to have Americans on a government database. If you who are watching this, if you're from Missouri, you should know that firsthand, because you've seen what happened firsthand when the Obama administration took all of those records in one fell swoop as part of a Social Security fraud case. We don't want to have law-abiding citizens on a database. How could you possibly not realize that?
Not to mention, you dope, killers and thugs and criminals don't go get their names they don't go through the background checks in the first place anyway. Come on, wake up.
Yeah. No, that was one of the huge. That was huge. I remember, and one last, I guess, brief digression. I remember when we did Stand Your Ground law. I remember calling you, Eric, a couple months later. There was a guy in your area there in Springfield, and he worked at a pizza ranch, a Pizza Hut in Springfield, and he had a prior, criminal charge. He couldn't own any firearms, and he knew that. And his manager kept a firearm next to the till at the Pizza Hut. And some guy broke in at around 10:05 after closing hours that evening. And long story short, there was a long-lasting, relatively speaking, gunfight that occurred. Both of these guys did mag changes during this shootout in Springfield. And when it was all said and done, the prosecution there was basically complaining that we can't prosecute this guy because his use of the gun was transitory, which is permitted, and because Missouri has a stand your ground law. So just to see the Missourians, like Chris said, and like you said, who are immune from spurious prosecutions, it's just such a huge deal. So Madeline, just ban him. Just Madeline, ban him. I can't see it right now, so just ban him. Get rid of him. So he's gone. But moving on to the coronavirus situation, Eric, getting a lot of questions on this. We've been discussing it all on ourselves on our own state videos. I'm not sure where you're at on this, but I looked and saw that the lovely mayor in Kansas City has issued his own stay-at-home order in addition to Governor Parsons' order. Not to be confused with Patrick Parsons, who's on here tonight. Sorry about that, Patrick. I can't help you. That's your name.
Long lost cousin, huh?
Yeah, long lost cousin. So in Kansas City, if you're out in violation of the travel ban, you're going to get hit with a misdemeanor charge, facing 6 months in jail and a $500 fine for each occurrence. Of course, the governor has his own statewide ban lasting through the 24th of the month, unless he extends it. What do you think? I mean, there's a lot of people on both sides of this situation. What are your thoughts on the concern that the cure or the reaction is worse than the virus?
I just say, thank God we live in an environment where the legislature can't pass bills that affect us right now, because it would be worse. And thank goodness these local officials and governors are somewhat limited to what they can do in these emergency calls. I mean, they clearly have got a great extent to what they can do, because I've never seen a more rapid growth in the expansion of government, in the people's rights being taken away. It's to a dizzying level, and it's somewhat scary. And until we went through this, you look at what happened in other histories of other governments and how dictators took control, and you kind of think, that could never happen here in America, right? Now I see it, and I'm not saying that some of this wasn't, that the outcome wasn't good. I think we definitely have to study this, and we need to study this issue and study the impact and look back and say, was this worth it? Because right now, as these numbers are declining, what was the early estimates were that 1 million plus people were going to die.
Oh yeah.
Now we're looking at sub 70,000.
Yeah.
And nobody wants anybody to die. This is, and the way in which people die is horrible. But that adds to the fear to it all.
Right.
What's happening is people are making decisions not out of any wisdom or logic or with any data or facts. They're making decisions all based solely out of fear. And then because no one wants to stand up and say the emperor has no clothes, everyone's all this groupthink and herd mentality has got people just nodding their heads and agreeing. And so, do we want people to be safe? Yes. But does that mean that we take away the ability for people to make rational decisions that serve their best interest, serve the best interest and safety of themselves and their family? I'm looking at some of these wide sweeping decisions that are being made, and some of them, they're not logical. And I think sometimes, for example, when you close down stores and you direct all of the volume of traffic through the few that are located, I think you're not really doing yourself a favor. When some of the decisions that have been made locally have actually, I think, done more harm than good. So I'm not so sure that some of these decisions have left us better off. And at the end of the day, I'm a little bit philosophical in nature, and you think about the cost of lives that have, people that died so that we could have these kind of freedoms, not so we could be safe.
Right.
So we could be free. We could have been safe all along.
Right.
We could be a safe people.
Yeah, we could have just paid those taxes to the king. We could have paid the tea tax. We could have done all those different things, and we'd have been safe.
Yeah, but America is the land of liberty, and right now it's not the land of liberty.
No,
and it's a sad state. So
Well, I've been mentioning to a lot of people just, the idea that even if you kind of agree that things are as bad as people say they are, or that the virus is as dangerous as people say they are, even if you agree to go along with what's happening, you should resist. You should do it begrudgingly. You should be pushing back against government all the time. To have, we've seen it from a lot of people, from my cold dead hand types of people who just like turned into, people who are begging the government to save them. And, we're under quarantine up here, or a stay at home order. And a lot of people are obeying that. But it's like, even if you're going to follow along with it, recognize that government takes freedom away. They take control. That's what you were saying a little bit earlier about, that's the fundamental problem that most politicians have with grassroots people, organizations, gun owners, is that it takes control away from them and returns it to the people. And so even if you're going to go along with what's being pushed here, at least do it begrudgingly, at least do it with skepticism and push back on the numbers that are being given. Watching a lot of gun owners, turn to our radical anti-gun Democrat governor here in Minnesota and say, please save us because we trust you and we're scared. It's just a recipe for those types of people to swoop in, grab all that freedom, and never give it back. Long after the virus is gone, we don't get those freedoms back.
And I talked about this to our Ohio people last night. What are we teaching our kids? I mean, one of the most egregious things that I've seen come out of this is this whole idea that you had these government officials then, for the first time really in American history, well, since maybe the Revolutionary War, but you have the government and you have media teaming up together to tell the population that if they see violations of this stuff going on, that they need to turn their neighbors and stuff in. And, we're sitting here normalizing that kind of a mentality for the next generation, let alone us. I grate underneath that kind of a thing, but we're teaching the next generation that this stuff is okay. That we can just sit here and become a giant nanny state. And if we see violators, there's a whole movie series about this. I forget what it's called. They use bow and arrows in it, but yeah, this is not what we want for this country. Games. We're the land of the free, not the land of the snitch on your neighbor type of a country. So
right. Well, it's like if the government was going door to door to confiscate firearms, all the gun owners would stand up and resist. If the government was going door to door, business, building to building, shutting down all the Planned Parenthoods, all the lefties would rise up and resist. But you roll in with COVID-19 and both sides of everything, this great divide that people said, well, this will stop the government from taking too much freedom because there's too much animosity. But you roll in with an illness like this, and all of a sudden, all sides, it appears, turn to the government to help them, protect them, and all they have to do is stay at home, shutter their doors, close their small businesses. And in places like Minnesota now, they're shutting down your ability to even apply for a permit to carry or go through that process. There's all these new gun owners who want to be able to carry to protect themselves. And, well, we don't have constitutional carry here like they have in Missouri. Right. And, you're just up a creek.
When I was pulling numbers out of Missouri.
Here in Ohio, they have a response to that snitch mentality. They say, snitches get stitches and end up in ditches.
That's the Cleveland way, right?
Yeah, that's from our good buddy Chris Laidlaw and Brian Andrick. So.
Man, I saw.
I was pulling numbers before we went live here, Eric, and I was looking at the number of infected people, and this is from Johns Hopkins website, so that's where I got it from. But the number of people, like you said, no one wants anybody to get this. I mean, Chris and Ben and I have grandparents who are in their 80s, and they're not too weak, but they're not too strong. And I was talking to Grandpa the other day, and he's like, well, we're not the youngest people. So he's like, we're just staying home. And that's the whole thing. Common sense has to take over here at a certain point. If you're in a risk category, you can stay home. That's your decision to make. But if not, destroying our economy for a situation that has infected currently in Missouri 3,539 people, which divided by a 6.1 million population is 0.0005% of the state. You know, a growing number of people, certainly on the Missouri Firearms Coalition page, are asking the question, you know, is this, I mean, well, no, they're beyond asking the question. They're saying, I'm sorry, but 0.0005% of the population isn't worth this many people being starved to death. It's not worth this many people. That's a little bit of hyperbole, obviously, but it's not worth this many people losing their jobs, losing, you know, 20% of their retirement fund, losing their mom and pop businesses, which are going to have a hard time reopening. So there's a lot of folks who are angry about that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what the question now is that people are asking is, how do we get out of this? Like, how long is this going to last? And then when you hear the you know, the scientists that are in the news, I'm blanking on his name, the doctor,
Fauci, or I can't pronounce his name.
Fauci.
And he's saying, well, ideally until it's completely over, and when it's over, I don't think anybody ought to even shake hands anymore.
Yeah.
You know, this is, I think we have to remember who we've now started listening to, and these are the folks that, you know, that basically run the county health departments, right? And if we lived our lives according to the way in which these folks wanted us to live our lives, we would never have any freedoms at all. Yeah, I had a committee hearing one time where we had the county health officials all come against a bill because it was going to allow for in-home cottage industry, so people to make jams and sell them. And I think the bill, it was allowing churches to have potlucks because some local Nazi had decided that if a church has a potluck, they can't invite so many people.
You're kidding.
And so we were basically doing what it seems obvious to anybody, which is that if you have a potluck, you know, people should be able to do that. And they kept going through they kept listing all of these diseases that people might get. And whenever I asked the question, so what does that really mean? When you use those fancy words, that whatever that person gets, what does that mean? What's the outcome? Finally, the person said, well, they might get basically diarrhea. And I said, I mean, so that's really what this is about. We're going to say no fun. People cannot share food. We're going to shut down what people have done in America for, you know, 100 plus years.
Yeah.
Because you don't want someone to get diarrhea, right?
The Thanksgiving dinner, we've all seen the pictures. It was a potluck.
Right.
Well, yeah, there's so much. You mentioned the church. I mean, there's a lot of people who are saying that, I mean, good gosh, going back a couple thousand years, that's the church has always been there to minister to those who are sick. But now It's not an essential travel item. So the elder, the pastor, the deacons in your church aren't even allowed by state executive action now in most of these states, if they wanted to even go to a sick person's home and help them.
Yeah,
in Iowa, you know, my home state of Iowa, Governor Reynolds has now very aggressively told any churches, don't you dare do communion on Easter Sunday, or there will be consequences for your church.
Right,
I mean, there was a time when the church would fight wars with the executive branch, aka the king, over who had what authority. But now we're just seeing so many people just say, oh, well, we got to do it because of the coronavirus, when it's infecting 0.0005% of the population, at least when it comes to Missouri. So
yeah, and I think no doubt, I don't want to belittle the impact that this virus can have on people. This is something that the individuals need to pay attention to. Yep. People need to be safe in their person, but that does not mean that we lose who we are as an American, as a people. That we lose the fact that power is derived from the people. It doesn't come the other way. Power was granted to us by God. It can't be taken away. So we have entrusted it to these elected officials, and right now they're not being very good trustees of the liberty, stewards of the liberty that we've entrusted to them.
Yeah.
And this concept of how do we get out of this, at some point people have to understand life itself has risks. Life itself is a date. You know, what was Helen Keller says, that's one of my favorite quotes, is she says, life is either a daring adventure or nothing. And then she says, security does not exist in nature, nor do the children of men as a whole experience it. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than exposure.
Well, like Tom Woods has been saying for the last couple of days, is when did these doctors become the new high priests of our society? They know one thing kind of well, not really. I mean, they've been making a lot of very, very bad decisions lately, but they're not social scientists. They're not economists, but we're putting all of our trust into these people to make these decisions that just absolutely ripple across the entire world. America wasn't founded in that regard. I mean, we never, we put all that aside when America got started. It's about the individual now, but here we are empowering these people to be essentially the new high priest class of this country and this world. No.
Well, and I'm not sure about Missouri, but Chris, tell Eric who Amy Acton is. Tell her who she is and what her background is.
She's
the health commissar for Ohio.
She's a huge Obama supporter. Back in 2008, she was an Obama organizer. She authorizes the late term abortion clinics here in Ohio. She is a far left activist. But now here she is making all the decisions that affect all of us. And somehow, because so much is on the line now, we're all supposed to just disregard her own worldview and trust that she will do the right thing for the good of humanity. And it's coming out now that she made her predictions based upon one phone call that she had with a Harvard professor who is running the models that have been proven to be an absolute joke now.
This is going around a lot. It's just this idea that what other time in human history, when people were getting sick, did they quarantine all the healthy people? It's like, if you're old, if you're unwell, if you have pre-existing conditions, if you have issues, like Aaron was saying, sometimes our grandparents wouldn't go out and do things when the flu is coming through church, in the middle of December. Sometimes you stay home from church because you don't want to risk getting the flu. When did it become natural to lock, tens and tens and tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people, healthy people, into their homes and shut down the whole world over the potential of getting ill from a virus that predominantly is targeting, unhealthy people with pre-existing conditions, the elderly. So you're making all these workers, all these businesses shut down. You're quarantining healthy people. It's like that meme going around. When you're quarantining sick people, that's called a quarantine. When you're quarantining healthy people, it's called tyranny.
Yeah.
It's just tyranny.
Yeah. If we have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that includes providing for your family. And this idea that they can completely set aside the means of production, the means of providing at will, whenever their criteria says it's time. That's not freedom.
The good news in Missouri, Eric, we're getting a lot of questions on this. I think you called me about this a while back, but a lot of questions on what can the governor do in any state, but in Missouri in particular, what can the governor do when it comes to gun rights restrictions? I think this predates your time in office, but I could be mistaken. But
it does,
it does. But the great news in Missouri, that Missouri Code Section 44.101 makes it clear the governor cannot restrict any of these rights. It says the state or any person shall not prohibit or restrict the lawful possession, transfer, sale, transportation, storage, display, or use of firearms or ammunition during an emergency. So it's a good bit of code in there for Missourians in particular. So
Ingrid says she's an ER nurse and she agrees 100%.
Oh, nice.
So we appreciate that.
I've said this before, but like to what you were saying, that we have turned over all the decision making to the healthcare community. And I used to jokingly say the worst elected officials are doctors. Sometimes I have some that are very good friends, And the one Senator Onder in Missouri does a good job.
I was going to ask you about Onder.
He does a pretty good job, pretty darn good job, more than anyone I know. But most doctors have a hard time separating their Hippocratic oath from the oath that they swore to protect and defend the Constitution, right? Because under the Hippocratic oath, the medical community, if you ask them, their attitude is, well, we need to do things. We need to use the law to make sure that there's no harm done, that keep people safe, keep people healthy. And they have no problem doing that because in their minds, they're used to people coming to them and them telling you what to do. And then it's just an extension to say, well, now I'm going to use the law to force you to do what I would advise you to do. But that is not good public policy. They do not, it's the antithesis of that, to say the individual has the right. Should they do some of these healthy things? Yes. Should they make those decisions? Those are virtuous decisions for an individual to make solely by their own free will. But to have government take away that free will is another thing altogether.
Yep.
Yeah, I've talked with a lot of people. I guess people you'd say are in the high risk category, and there's some amazing people out there, and they just simply say, "Look, I am not willing to prioritize my own health over, the health of my grandchildren, over their futures, over the inheritance that I want to pass on to them, and that their parents want to pass on to them. I'm not willing to sit here and say that because I have a 2% chance of even contracting it, and then a 2% chance or a 1% chance of that 2% chance of, falling seriously ill or having, it'd be fatal. I'm not willing to personally lock an entire country down and force my grandchildren to endure this, to take away their freedoms, their prosperity, the small businesses that my children have created for their children now. And that's just something I think we need to see a whole lot more of here, is people just, saying, like you said, a little risk or even great risk is part of life. And, we should not prioritize that over, I think, our safety over the futures of our children and our grandchildren. So I've been hearing that from a lot of gun owners, a lot of people we've been talking to lately. It's been great to hear.
Well, gun people know, I think, sometimes more than a lot of folks that, this is not about just us, that what we do as gun owners today, for example, is in part because of what our forefathers and our grandfathers did for us. And what we do today is going to benefit our children and grandchildren in a way they can't even possibly imagine yet. And so there may be something there with gun owners having a longer term view towards history or towards the lack of freedom, because they all know what happens in all the rest of these countries where gun rights are not fought to be protected. And certainly in Missouri, they have been protected. It's been great.
For those who don't know, Patrick somehow lost his audio throughout all this. So while I have periods of quiet time, it's just because I have nothing to add because somebody else is saying it very much better than me. Patrick can't even talk if he wanted to. So all he can do is really hold up signs, that say stuff.
Yeah. How about this one?
That he wants to communicate. So he's out for the.
How about that one?
You can be that sign guy from
there you
Instagram.
Go.
Yeah,
that's joinafc.org.
I'll just leave it up there.
We should mention briefly what we're just a brief recap for all the folks who are asking about HR 5717 before we sign off here with Eric. But guys, there's been hundreds of thousands of emails from AFC members slamming into Congress over the last, 10 days, 2 weeks since AFC has sounded the alarm on this bill. If you have not done so yet, I think Ben is prepping an email link right now that we're going to try to drop in all the comment sections. But this bill is being talked about right now. They just assigned the bill to subcommittee in Congress. What was that? 10 days ago, guys, 2 weeks ago now. It is moving. It needs your attention. Take a moment and fire off your email, because these people, like Rahm Emanuel said, they never let a crisis go to waste. And this is their kind of time to do this kind of stuff right now in real time. So if you've not sent your email off to your congressman, to your senators, be sure to make your voice heard right away.
I've never actually had the chance to do this before, but I am going to, for the first time, I'm going to sit here and list off the people who are joining American Firearms Coalition tonight. I'm going to list off a couple of these people. So listen for your names if you're watching right now. Tonight, we've got Richard from Browning, Montana, who has become a member of the American Firearms Coalition. We've got William in Edgewood, New Mexico. Got a New Mexican watching right now. That's pretty sweet. Debbie Nix checking in from Aiken, South Carolina. Very nice to have them with us. John from Provo, Utah. Jason, hey, Patrick, this one's coming from Columbus, Georgia. We've got somebody coming in here. Oh, James from Weston, Ohio. Glad to have you here with us, joining up at joinafc.org. So you guys should be receiving your membership packets here very shortly. So there's a couple. Actually, I just hit refresh. There's actually a bunch more. Should I keep going through the list?
Sure, why not?
Okay, we've got Bobby from Sequim, Washington. We have Michael from Savannah, Georgia. Another Georgian. Come on, Ohio. Charles from Cottonwood, Arizona. Neil from Aberdeen, South Dakota.
There we go.
Jim from Center City, Minnesota. I have no idea where that's at, Ben. Do you know where that's at? Center City, Minnesota.
It's probably in the center.
Huh? Yeah. Right.
It was a funny question. It's on the left-hand side.
Daniel from Clarksburg, West Virginia. Keith from Mexico, New York. Aaron, do you have any idea where that's at?
There's a lot of gun owners up there in Mexico, New York. I hear about that all the time on our Facebook page. Very excited.
Gene from Albuquerque, New Mexico. One of the few states I've not yet been to. Ken from Litchfield, Minnesota. Minnesota is outperforming Ohio tonight, and I'm very ashamed of it. Tony from Selma, Alabama. James from Spokane, Washington.
Nice.
Donna from Buford, Georgia. I'm done. I haven't seen any Ohio ones in here, so I'm done.
Well, I hope things are going well up in Spokane. I'm not sure exactly where the coronavirus is supposed to be up there, like geographically, but I know Washington was not in phenomenal shape.
Yeah. For everybody who joined up in the last 2 weeks, by the way, I know that the AFC t-shirt fulfillment team is going to be pumping out shirts as fast as they possibly can on Saturday, as in 2 days from now. We ran out after our recent show and had to wait for 10 days to get a resupply. So anybody who's joined up in the recent past, your shirt will be packaged and prepped by our team over the weekend. So be watching for those. It's going to be coming at you guys quickly. So be watching that. A lot of folks who are excited to help package all these up for us. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
Lovely. Well, and again, fill out your petitions, guys, opposing HR 5717. I guess it's not a petition; these are direct connect email links to your congressmen and U.S. senators. Just a quick reminder on what HR 5717 is. It creates a national searchable gun database. It bans almost all semi-automatic firearms. It institutes a federal magazine ban on any magazine that holds more than 10 rounds. I can see Senator Burlison's toes are curling over there when he thinks about all the freedom they have in Missouri. This is like the anti-bill of what they passed in Missouri. It's like that had everything good in it, and this has everything bad in it. So it implements a national red flag gun seizure law. It's all part of one bill. It creates a 30% tax on guns and a 50% tax on ammunition. It bans everybody under 21 years old from exercising their Second Amendment rights. It institutes a one gun a month waiting period. So you can only buy one gun every 30 days. Forced storage requirements basically make sure that all of your guns have to be locked up in a safe virtually 24 hours a day. It bans all the home builds, no 80%ers anymore. It bans suppressors. And it expands gun-free zones and continues on from there. It's all part of HR 5717. So go to the links that I assume are pinned on the bottom of most all of these videos. And if there's not one there, go to www.defeathr5717.com. It's www.defeathr5717.com. and click on that link. It's not just a lame petition. It's a direct connect email that'll send an email to your U.S. senators and congressman or woman telling them to oppose H.R. 5717.
I wanted to mention the pre-written emails. We have Eric on here. Eric, we hear from people from time to time who question whether or not these emails are effective, whether or not anybody reads them, whether or not it does anything. And we can tell until we're blue in the face sometimes that, yes, this works and we've seen it work in real time, but you're the guy that they send them to. You're the kind of person that receives these emails. So from your perspective, tell our members how important these action steps are.
Pay attention, everybody. You're going to hear now from an actual state senator on all of the tools that we use all the time as Ohio gun owners, as Pennsylvania Firearms Association, Minnesota Gun Rights, all these different groups. This is what we do. Now we're going to hear from a state senator exactly about how they receive this grassroots pressure.
So I would the best way to explain it is that it'd be like playing baseball or football or whatever and not having anyone cheer you on. So for example, when it comes to any second amendment issues, I'm getting emails from the other side. I'm getting moms demand action and their, Michael Bloomberg paid for t-shirts.
Around here, we call them red shirt, radical, lying, commie mommies. So anyway, keep going.
They're showing up and they're coming to the events. And if I look, I'm somebody that's different. I have my position. They're really not going to move me off my position. But if you most legislators, if all you're hearing is from that group, you suddenly start questioning your positions, or what you start doing is start saying, yeah, all right, I'm not gonna vote with them, but I'm not gonna step out on a limb, put a target on my back, and carry an important issue that moves the ball forward for Second Amendment rights. So you've got to hear from the people that support this issue. Now, that being said, what I will say is that what's the loudest in your medium in which you communicate, I would say an email, is great because it's quick, it's easy, you just click, right? Like there's not much work for you to send an email. But picking up the phone is, if you're going to spend some time picking up the phone, if you want your voice really heard, pick up the phone, get a hold of that lawmaker on the phone. They will call you. Most local elected officials, even state senators, state reps, if you call and schedule an appointment in district while they're not in session, they will have coffee with you. They will have lunch with you. So I would recommend doing that. And so the more time that you want to focus on that person, the more the impact that you can have. I mean, shoot, even sending a carrier pigeon will work. It'll get people's attention.
So in other words, these issues are very controversial. You're hearing it from both sides of the aisle. And for people who are on the fence, or maybe they're a soulless politician, maybe they don't have any principles, maybe they are just in that position of that office because they like the title, they like the power. That's why they need to hear. Is it fair to say they need to be hearing from their constituents on these issues, or they're going to go whichever way the wind is blowing, and the red shirt, radical, lying commie mommies are always blowing to the left?
Right. There's a lot of elected officials that are sheeple, is what I would say.
Yeah. Yes. Folks, this is not an Ohio or Pennsylvania anomaly. Even in the Republican state of Missouri, they have sheeple in the legislature.
Well, I won't mention any names or put you in the spot, Eric, but I know back in 2016 with that veto override, we had to get 109, right? 109 votes was the magic number for the veto override.
That's right.
We get 109. You had about 116 in the caucus at that time, correct?
That's good. That's good memory. Yeah.
And some of these things are hard to forget. And we were whip counting that thing. We were privately, you were, and the caucus was, and we were. Well, I'll just say it right. It's already passed now, so there's nothing left to keep too secret. But we weren't sure what was going to happen. It wasn't a done deal. It wasn't a final. It was not finalized until it was done that night.
And I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you who it was, who was having concerns. But all I could say was be watching people's quotes, what they say to the press, and you need to, and asking you to have your members call people. And
well, I think we found out one of those people because we were doing exactly that. We were trying to call around, figure who it was. I think one of their names was like Donna Lichtenegger or something like that. What?
Yeah,
Aaron wasn't.
It doesn't.
I don't even remember what
there was a variety of names that were involved, but my point was that that was the whole point, was that when they began to get the emails, and they began to get the phone calls, and they began to get all the pressure,
it started encouraging
from gun owners in their district. That was the key thing. In their district, all those people who were on the fence, who would not commit to me, who would not commit to you, all those people were the ones who began to get those calls from their district. And hey, they listened.
We love that. We love that in a politician. Listen to your constituents.
Yeah.
That's all we ask.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, thanks for your time, Eric. We appreciate it greatly. I'm sure you have things you can bounce on to tonight, but you are the first elected official we've had on the show. So we'll see if we bring some more on. There's some great folks in Ohio. There's some great folks in Wyoming. There's no great folks in Iowa. And I don't think Ben would let a politician within 100 yards of a camera on one of our shows. But thank you for your work, not only in 2016, but because I think a lot of what our members, might already know, but just as a reminder, what happens in Missouri doesn't just impact the 6.1 million people in Missouri. That had reverberations all across the country. That sparked and it continued to spark the momentum in favor of constitutional carry and stand your ground law. I know Chris and I used the language that we helped with in Missouri in 2016 to then help draft Iowa's stand your ground law in 2017. We used kind of a combined bills from Missouri and Iowa to draft, and from Ohio to draft the Wyoming stand your ground law bill in 2018. So what you did in that one session did not just benefit Missourians, but people all across the country. And
that's really humbling.
Well, I mean, it really set a standard. I've mentioned that 50 times up here on Facebook Live videos that have been seen by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of gun owners. Like I said, many people in Minnesota get used to this sort of, the best we can do is the best we can do, type of mentality out of a lot of our, especially Republican politicians in Minnesota. And so we've continually pointed them back to Missouri, back to folks like you, Senator Burlison, and said, no, this is what elected officials have done in states like Missouri. So there's really no excuse for people in states like Minnesota to sit there on their thumbs and say, oh, there's nothing I can do. Yes, you can, because one person oftentimes is all it takes to make a huge difference and start a huge shift in the legislature to pass and move bills like this. So again, thank you from Minnesota.
Thank you. I want to say, I don't want to let this go without giving props to one of the best, if not the best, state representative in Missouri, Jared Taylor.
Oh yeah,
who has done an amazing job. He pours into these bills on the House side, and he's a great companion to work with in this Missouri Capitol.
Yeah, we will have him on. We have raved about Jared all the time on the show in the past, Eric, by all means. Everybody, I think, watching right now knows that he has 86 co-sponsors right now on his SAPA legislation. And we should have him on here sometime very quickly to discuss that. A lot of states have tried to emulate the Missouri bill draft that you and Jared have filed this year. And frankly, a lot of states have done a very poor job of that. We can discuss that more later on. But yeah, no, we love Jared. Have discussed him a lot. He has taken your shoes and filled them fully in the House side as you bumped over to the Senate. So it's a great 1-2 combination. It's been huge. So
well, the last thing I would say is that Eric, if you ever want to move, or Senator Burlison, if you ever want to move to Ohio or Pennsylvania, we'd gladly take you out here. We could use this kind of leadership, this zeal for freedom and liberty. I could use it in any one of these two states. So if you want to convince your buddy in the House side there to move out here, we'd take him too. So
Say, we've got to send a majority leader in Minnesota who could be replaced tomorrow, and nobody would cry over it.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate all the work that you all do, and we need someone that's aggressive. We need a group like you all that holds our feet to the fire, that holds elected officials' feet to the fire, and what you're doing is bigger than just politics. It's our rights, and the same feelings that I had whenever passing that bill. You realize it's not about getting elected. It's not about having a title. It's about something much greater than that, and we're all working to keep keep the people having the very thing that God gave them, which is the ability to have life and liberty and to defend it. And that's something that's more powerful and it's more satisfying than any dollar can pay or any amount of glory or title can give you on this planet. So thanks for what you do.
Well, let's end this there.
Yeah, that's a great spot. Well, take care, Eric. Keep safe in your lockdown, your quarantine there in Missouri, and keep fighting for gun rights in the state. We'll keep helping you with the Missouri Firearms Coalition. And this whole delay was unfortunate, as we made so much progress on SAPA, but we're not done yet, and we'll keep that fight going. So,
well,
sounds good.
That's all we've got for tonight, folks.
Patrick, if you can hear us, maybe you can't even hear us, but you can cut it.
But you can't hear me.
All right. Well, thanks a lot
Take care,
for watching,
folks. Have a good night, everybody.
Shelter in place and obey those orders or not. So that's all we've got from Ohio and Pennsylvania tonight. Have a good night.
Take care.